Silent key planning. I'm sure that doesn't seem like a very good topic on one hand, but I think it's an important one, and I'd like to kind of share about it tonight. The presentation I'm making tonight is really 7 years in the making. 7 years ago, 7 years ago, 3 weeks ago, a doctor told me I had less than 4 months to live, and they said, get your affairs in order. So I immediately started thinking, how to help my family. And, of course, you do your will and all your things you're going to do. But one of the things I thought about was my equipment. What am I going to do with it? So I started figuring out how to disperse it and get rid of it. And fortunately for me, in April, all of a sudden, they came back and said, we were wrong. You don't have any cancer. You're going to live. And I said, thank you. And I was thankful. I felt the Lord had healed me on that. But the truth is, at some point, all of us are going to become silent keys. And I think that we need to think about it for the sake of our families. And hopefully, I can give some hints. Now, these are not from the club. They're just my own personal observations. But I felt like I wanted to share them. And you might not agree with a lot of things I say tonight, but hopefully it will stimulate your thinking on what you can do to help your family. What happens to your ham equipment when you either die or maybe you move to some kind of in-between home or something? You're no longer able to use it. Well, usually your family will not want it. Most of us, our spouses, they may or may not be hams, but likely they're not going to want to be using our equipment. And a lot of them are going to want it gone because they just don't know what to do with it. Most families don't know what equipment you have. Many of us hide that, and they don't know what the real sale value is. They have suspicions, but they don't really know, especially on little things or things that may not be main items like your radio. They probably don't know how to sell it. I mean, let's face it, if you're not a ham, how would you know how to sell ham equipment? And then fourth thing, if you have a plan of who will handle it, you're going to help your family. That's the key. You're trying to do everything you can to help your family. So that's kind of what we're about tonight. One thing you have to do is you have to allow families time to grieve. When someone passes away, there's just a lot of things they got to do right then. Funeral arrangements, insurance, probably there's banking, there's all kinds of things. And ham equipment may or may not be high on their list. It just, they may want to take care of it, but the truth is it's not the priority. Now, occasionally somebody wants to do it right now, but you have to allow people to grieve, and people take different times. Some people will take a week and they're ready to get it all done. Some people, it's going to take months. And the important thing I would tell you is the family sets the timing, not who's selling their stuff. Let the family set the agenda there. What are their options? Well, they could donate it to a club, a school, an individual, and many clubs like the Spokane DX can give a tax deductible receipt for it. And some families don't really need the income, and they would rather have it be a memorial or be some way to something that mattered. They could sell it, and the family could try and sell it. They could find someone to buy it all, but I will tell you, usually when that happens, they just get a fraction of the value, or they could get a friend or club to sell it for them. Well, here are some of my observations or lessons I've learned in doing a few of these. What families want and need from their equipment, it differs greatly. Some need all the money they can get. I mean, they're tight. They just need all the money. Some just really want it gone. They just don't want to mess with it. Some are just overwhelmed by it and need someone to handle it for them. It's just like they just don't need that stress, and they just want somebody to take care of it. And some would like to see the money to go to something that's important to them. Maybe that, they have something they care a lot about. Hams and their families often think the value is much higher than reality. It's only worth what somebody will pay for it. I don't care what you paid for it or what you think it's worth. It's only worth what somebody's going to pay for it. Older equipment and homemade equipment is very difficult to sell. And part of it on the older equipment, you can't get parts for some of it. Sometimes technology has changed and they're just when the ICOM 7300 came about, I mean, all of a sudden, it dropped the market out of how much, some radios were worth. So, just because you think, you bought a high-end radio 20 years ago, it may or may not be worth very much. And homemade equipment, people don't, the person who made it understands it, knows what it does, but there's no manual. There's nothing. So it's difficult to sell that. Most people that are going to sell, whether it be a club or an individual, they want to move it quickly. I know after I kept stuff in my garage for 6 weeks from a silent, when I had to leave my car out, my wife was ready to get it gone. People want to move it. If you've tried to ship ham radio equipment, I have an amp, a Henry amp that weighs 156 pounds. It is expensive and risky to ship it. So that's a factor. And I would say used coax is not worth very much. Nobody knows, what it's worth. It's very difficult to sell used wire antennas. Most people think I could make it and don't know what it is, don't know if it's broken, don't know how it's been used. Selling guide towers is a problem. If you have to pay for someone to take it down, you rarely break even. That's just kind of how it works. Tri-band antennas are becoming more difficult to sell because so many people are going to 3, 4, 5, 6 band antennas. So they don't get a lot of return on money anymore. And I think you can realize that. And I'd say selling someone else's equipment takes a lot of time and energy. Now, it does depend on how much they have. But many of you know the last silent key I sold. Well, I kept track. I spent over 35 hours a week for 6 weeks selling it. So, I mean, it's a lot of commitment that you have. A couple of rules of thumb that I operate by, but these are mine. They're not necessarily anybody else's. If something is in pristine shape, I mean, it's really, you got all the boxes, parts, there's no scratches, probably 75% of the value if it's still being sold. If it's no longer made, about 60% of the value. And if you want to sell it quickly, probably about 50% of the value. So just some rules of thumb. Now, a couple of hints. You need to have a clear understanding of what the arrangement is with the family and the seller. By the way, you want to have this before anything is done. What is the understanding? And you probably want to write it down actually for both parties where you've got it. That way you don't have, 3 months later, another relative comes along and they say, I didn't agree to that. And then all of a sudden you're in the middle of a triangle and it's really messy. Get a clear understanding. And you want to kind of decide what the agreement is. And it can be all kinds of things. But on the last silent key that I sold for the club, we kind of agreed with the partner, everything would be sold locally. We weren't going to get into the shipping business. Everything would be priced to move fast. We weren't going to kind of hold out for high value. We were trying to move it fast. And the income would be divided between the family and the club. And everybody understands what the arrangement is going to be ahead of time. So, just a couple of hints there. When you have your equipment sold by club or an individual, the split varies greatly. You have 50-50, 60-40, 66-33, 70, all the way up to, 95-5. So, for example, Dell and I have an agreement that if I die before Dell, he'll sell my equipment and it'll be a 90-10. If he dies before me, I'll sell his equipment. So, whatever it is, make sure you understand what it is. And there are factors to consider. The amount of equipment. If there's just a few items, well, that's easy. We just do that because we care. But if there's hundreds and hundreds of items, well, that's a factor to consider because you're putting a lot of time and effort in storage. The age of it. It's easy to sell new equipment. It's hard to sell old equipment. The wishes of the silent key. What are they wanting? Are they wanting it to go to another individual? Are they wanting it to go to a club at a school? Do they have something? And then your relationship to the silent key. If it's somebody and you have a relationship, it's pretty different than other things. One of the things you got to know, you won't be here to explain anything. So think about that for a moment. You understand everything in your shop. You know everything you own. You maybe don't, but you know many things you own. But you're not going to be here to explain it. So what is it? Does it even work? What goes with it? Is there a mic? Is there a power cord? Where are things located? Like if you have boxes, where are the boxes that go in it? Did you make any modifications? Those are all factors that you want to take into consideration when you're selling it. So what do you need to do now? And all of us need to do this, honestly, for the sake of our families. You need to have a complete inventory. And I mean complete. All of your equipment. I wouldn't bother with things under $50, but all of your equipment. What is it? Make, model, serial number. What goes with it? Where do you find it? Power cables, mic, manuals, boxes. What's the working condition? Does it work on all bands? Does it not work on 10 meter? What is it? When and where you purchased it, the purchase price, even though that's just it's good to know that. And then any modifications, this is critical, that because nobody else is going to know this. If you don't write it down, nobody's going to know what you've done. So, those are some hints. Well, how does that inventory look? I got two examples I wanted to show you. Randy Hall, a K7AGE, he's a YouTuber. He has a form he uses that looks something like this. And basically you can just see, up the top, the equipment, the manufacturer, the model, the date, when he made the document, where are the manuals, was it promised to anybody, or are the factory boxes there, serial number, worth, and then he actually puts pictures on his, and then down at the bottom, notes. And it's a great system. It was too much work for me. On my system, I just use an Excel spreadsheet. Basically at the top, I give notes about where things are located. And then you can see, I'll list the equipment, the serial number, the cost, the estimated value, where I acquired it, when I acquired it. And then any information goes in the last one, like where the boxes are, if there's anything wrong with it, or if I made any modifications. You can just use a simple spreadsheet. You don't have to have, some real fancy thing, but you need all of those kinds of things in it. Couple of things for the family. They need to know how to notify the FCC about you becoming a silent key. And I have in the handout that's now on our website in the article section, how you do that. How do you notify them? How to notify the ARL. And the forms are actually there. And I would tell you, fill out the forms, everything but your death date, and have it all filled out where all they've got to do is add one date. And then if you've arranged to sell someone to sell your equipment, your family needs to know who it is. That's kind of a critical thing. Couple of things. Everybody, the seller and your family needs to know where your inventory list is kept. Where is this inventory list? It does no good if they can't find it. If you've promised any equipment as a gift to someone, be sure the family and seller know it. I can tell you people will come up and say, oh, he promised me that. They promised me this. If you don't know it ahead of time, you're just caught. And honestly, you can't accept it unless you know it ahead of time. So if maybe you wanted to give something to one of your good friends, make sure that's clearly established ahead of time. And then where will they find all the items? Where are your equipment? Where are the manuals? Where are cables? And you may do that with pictures or anything. I'm not going to take any time to do it because it's in the handout, but there are two great articles out of QST that kind of can help you. One was from the April 2018, the inventory list by Noel Beardsley, and the other was from September 2019 called Silent Key Estate Planning, a guide by Dino Pappas. And those are excellent. Also, there's a couple of great YouTube videos that can give you ideas and kind of a different perspective than I have. And, I'd encourage you to maybe look at those. And then I will tell you the resource packet that's on our articles tab on our website, it does include a PDF of this PowerPoint. The form that Randy used, a copy of my form, how to let the ARL and the FCC know, tells you how to do those things. And so all of those are available as part of that particular packet.